Hello friends! Welcome to Italian Cooking for Shut-ins. This is your shelter-in-place resource for Italian food. Easy, simple, budget-friendly for all of us. Food that your whole family will enjoy. I wanted to open this up with a quote that a friend of mine, Tracy, shared with me earlier today because I think it has a lot of resonance for what we're about to do. She pulled it from a book she's reading, and it says, in reference to the Italian culture, it's a culture that sweeps you in, sits you down in the kitchen, and feeds you so well you really don't want to leave. So I'm hoping that I'll get to bring a little bit of that culture to your homes while you're sitting there and you're stuck and you're worried and you're scared. Hopefully this is an opportunity to cook something fun and to escape to Italy for just a little while. All right, so our first step in getting started, anytime you cook, and especially now, is to get those hands washed. Hopefully, we're all washing our hands a lot these days. After going out, after touching surfaces for a long period of time. I read that if you are wondering whether you're washing your hands enough, that you are not. Lesson number one, wash those hands. You'll probably see it a few times today because we'll be handling raw food. Alright. So there's only a handful of ingredients necessary for chicken parmesan. We need chicken breasts, we need breadcrumbs, and we need Parmesan cheese. We'll need a little bit of oil to get the breading to stick to the chicken. And other than the things that you serve this with, that's all you need. Chicken Parmesan is basically a breaded baked chicken, and it's served with pasta and spaghetti sauce and mozzarella cheese on top. The beauty of this is that you can use basically any ingredients you want. I make my own breadcrumbs. I use these to make the meatballs for memory. But it's really simple to just go to your grocery store or order from your grocery store these days the Progresso Italian seasoned breadcrumbs and use those instead. There's ways to scale up just about everything that we've done that I'll be showing you to make it more complicated or more foodie, but it's really not necessary. It's totally up to you. So you take your breadcrumbs. I have a little bit more than a third of a cup of breadcrumbs in here. And to make your breadcrumb mixture, you want to have roughly equal parts of Parmesan cheese and breadcrumbs. So I'm going to add a little bit more than a third of a cup of Parmesan cheese to these breadcrumbs. All right. Mix them up nice and well. And with that, the breading is ready to go. Okay, the next part of making chicken parmesan is a whole lot of fun, especially now in these stressful times. What you need to do is first take a sip of your wine. And then get your meat mallet ready, because what we need to do is pound this chicken to tenderize it. And it's a great outlet for anything that you're worried about these days. One recommendation that I have is to make sure that you have the chicken clear of anything that you might be eating out of or using that you're not going to put in the oven, because the chicken does spray the juice, and the raw juice from the chicken can have bacteria and other things in it that are not good. So you want to keep your raw meat and raw meat juices away from other things. All right, so we pound away. They look a lot bigger after you pound them. if you don't have a tenderizer, I believe that you could substitute with a rolling pin. That would be the next thing that comes to mind. Maybe you could scavenge in your toolbox for a hammer. I suppose that could work, or a rubber mallet if you cover it with something that would keep both it and the chicken away from each other. Of course, these days, almost anything is, well, pretty much everything is just a click away from online ordering. So meat mallet, very handy, a lot of fun to use. All right, so as I mentioned before, the olive oil is used to help the breadcrumbs stick to the chicken. So rather than filling a whole bowl with olive oil and dipping the chicken in the bowl, what I do is I pour a little bit on each piece. And what this does is it allows me to conserve olive oil. Olive oil is actually pretty expensive, and I use a lot of it, so I try to be conservative in my use, especially now when we should be minimizing our trips to the grocery store. We want to be very judicious in the amount that we use. Now, you don't have to use olive oil. You could use vegetable oil. You could use, I would avoid using things like sesame oil or peanut oil because those will flavor your food differently. But any one of the neutral vegetable-y type oils I think would work fine. I tend to use my vegetable oil for popcorn, so I conserve my olive oil for this. All right, the next step is breading. Oh, important step is preheating the oven. I bake mine at 400 degrees. Get that puppy going. All right. So breading is fairly straightforward. You want to douse your guy in the breading, and then make sure he's nice and coated. And you can set them right on your non-stick cookie sheet. If you do not have a non-stick cookie sheet, you could use a sticky cookie sheet and maybe put a little bit of olive oil or something to coat it to prevent the chicken from sticking. And you could also potentially use like a Pyrex baking dish or something like that. There really isn't a whole lot of restriction on what you use for cooking. The dark pan, though, I believe will help the chicken achieve a nice brown color, which you'd like to see. A little crispy on the outside and juicy on the inside. Okay, we've got one more. So this was about 2/3 of a cup of breading that we're using to cover this chicken. And as you can see, there's plenty here. Not quite enough, well, maybe. There might be enough to do a 4th chicken breast with this breading. All right. So once the chicken are ready to go and the oven is preheated, what you are going to do, and this is probably the hardest part to explain, you basically want to cook it through so that it's browned on both sides and not overcooked. You don't want it to be dry and tough and kind of nasty as an eating experience. And I'm going to guess that that's roughly 6 minutes per side. But what I do is I basically just check. Okay, here's our, well, actually, let me get rid of this. This is our, we're doing that. And the second hand washing, because we've just handled raw chicken. All right. So yes, as I was saying, I tend to look at what the chicken looks like after about 4 or 5 minutes to see if it's browning nicely, and then I will turn it over. And then after it's brown on both sides, then I coat it with a little bit of mozzarella cheese, each piece, and I will put the chicken back in the oven to melt the cheese. And then once the cheese is melted, it's ready to go. So from I guess, breading to taking out of the oven, you're looking at maybe 25 minutes or so to prepare this meal. In the meantime, while the chicken is cooking or while we're waiting for the oven to preheat, you can prepare your sides. So we plate the Parmesan chicken with a little bit of pasta. I prefer the vermicelli or the long noodles for serving chicken Parmesan. We'll put the noodles down first. We'll put a little sauce on top, a little red sauce. As far as noodles are concerned, pick your favorite. As far as your spaghetti sauce is concerned, pick your favorite. Mine is Prego traditional. I like it. My family likes it. It's easy to find. It's not super expensive. You can make your own sauce if you want. Again, there's lots of opportunities to scale up here. Similarly with the pasta, I just get the Barilla pasta, and I like the whole grain. But you don't have to do that. You could do curly pasta, you could do rigatoni, you could do masticholi or some such thing. So anyway, it's your call. Whatever you got in the cupboard, use that. I am also serving ours with a side of vegetables. Again, in these days, we're looking at maybe fewer fresh vegetables so that we can minimize our trips to the grocery store. So we have a freezer full of frozen vegetables, and we have canned as well. So I'm just heating up a bag of what else? The Italian blend vegetables to cook on the side. So we will, I'll be right back to you after we get this chicken in the oven and it starts cooking. Welcome back. We now have the oven preheated to 400 degrees, and I've placed the chicken inside on the middle rack. So as I mentioned before, we will be giving it about 5 minutes per side. I'm gonna check in about 5 minutes to see how brown it's looking, and then if it looks ready, I'm gonna turn it over, and we'll go from there. Just to revisit a few things about serving and plating the chicken. You want to have, as the chicken is cooking, you want to have your pasta sauce heating up on the stove. I've got this on a low setting, just sitting here perking along in the background. As I mentioned before, any out of the jar pasta sauce that you enjoy is going to work just fine. Or if you want to make your own, that's great too. I like to add a little bit of oregano to the Prego to kind of spice it up a little bit. You could also do things like saute some garlic and onion to get a little fancy till it's soft, and then add the sauce and maybe a little tiny dose of crushed red pepper. Might give it a little bit of zing. The pasta, I've got the water in on the background. I have the water on low. I'm going to turn it up a little bit here to maybe 6 to get the water into a slow boil. I have a terrible habit of allowing my pasta dishes and rice to boil over, which makes a huge mess on the stove. So try to keep things at kind of a low boil. I'm going to use the long spaghetti, probably about half a box to feed the 3 of us. We might have a little bit left over, which of course is fine. We serve it up with some vegetables. And I season, so what I do to kind of spruce up the frozen vegetables for my boys is I will add, after they cook down, I'm going to turn those up just a little bit, I'm going to add some garlic powder, some black pepper, and a bit of kosher salt. Of course you can add regular salt as well. The kosher salt has a little bit bigger grains, so it gives you kind of more of a burst of salty experience when you eat it. So that's kind of fun to put on your vegetables. And of course, because it's delicious and everyone loves it, I will also add a little bit of butter to the vegetables once they are ready to go. So serving this meal is kind of a matter of preparing a little bit ahead of time, and then having everything kind of ready to go when everything comes out of the oven, when your chicken comes out. And we'll do that. We will be back again as the chicken starts to look brown. Okay, so the chicken is starting to look brown. I think it's going to be hard to show you what this looks like on the video setup that I have, but perhaps you can see it from there. Looking brown. Okay, so I'm going to turn them over. Meanwhile, I have my pasta in the water. Got it boiling at a very, very slow boil. Here you can see the brown quite a bit better on this side. Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, I think, on this chicken before we need to put the mozzarella cheese on it. Okay, we've got our sauce hot, we've got our vegetables cooking, and we've got the noodles slow boiling. So we'll come back as soon as I put the mozzarella cheese on. Okay, so the chicken is browned. It's ready to go for its mozzarella cheese coating. So I get the shredded mozzarella. As you can see, it's a huge bag, which is appropriate for an Italian family. I'm just going to slide the chicken out on its shelf and reach in and sprinkle the mozzarella cheese on top. How much you put on, of course, is entirely up to you. If you're trying to avoid dairy, or dairy is a problem, you could, of course, skip this part of the recipe. This is totally optional. I love mozzarella, so I tend to go a little crazy with it. Make a nice thick layer on top. And it'll take about 5 minutes or so for that to melt down. And in that time, I'm going to prepare the rest of the dishes that go, or finalize the rest of the dishes that go with this meal. Okay. All right, so what does that entail? After we shut our oven, oh, by the way, you could make cleanup easier when you do this meal if you spread a layer of aluminum foil on your cookie sheet. Then you can just roll it up and throw it away. I did not do that, but I'm not the one that does the dishes, so. Okay, vegetables. While that cheese is melting, I've put a little bit of water in with the frozen vegetables to give them something to cook in. I'm going to drain that water out to make space for the butter. And then put it back on the heat, just on the lowest low setting, just to keep it warm and to help the butter melt. And I don't measure the butter exactly, but I'm going to say for a bag of vegetables, probably about a tablespoon of butter is plenty. Got that. And then we season to taste. We've got our pepper on there, our garlic powder, and our salt. I pour the salt out in my hand and I sprinkle it on my separately from pouring it out, because you never know when you could have a very strong accidental eruptive pour out of your box, and then your vegetables are no good. So that's why I do it that way. I like to play it a little bit safe. Mix it all up. Pick up the escapees. And we're good to go. Those can just sit on the low heat setting until it's time to serve. It's at this point, with your cheese on the chicken, your vegetables seasoned, your sauce hot, and you're about to drain the noodles, to give your family the 2-minute warning that dinner will be ready in 2 minutes. That gives them enough time to shut off their video games or get to a stopping point and join you at the dinner table. So I'm going to do that now. 2-minute warning. All right, last thing to do is drain these noodles. be mindful when I'm pouring my noodles into the colander, not to pour too fast, because you don't want the water that the noodles have boiled in to wash back over the noodles once they've been in the sink. It's just kind of a layer of protection against your noodles. Probably not a huge deal, but I like to do it. There. So we've drained our noodles. Now, the thing we want to do is treat these noodles so that they do not stick together. So that when it comes time to plate the pasta, we don't just have a giant clump. And what I do to prevent the noodles from sticking together is I just add a little bit of sauce. I have never personally found the use of oil in the water to be very effective at preventing noodles from sticking together. So I just take a couple spoonfuls of the sauce and I coat the noodles. As I understand it, my grandmother from Termini Marese, Sicily, she really didn't like to have pasta sauce on her pasta. She liked it to be plain and simple, to have I guess a contrast with the taste of the sauce. I have never figured out how to make the noodles not stick together. I guess you could add olive oil or something after the noodles have cooked in order to prevent them from sticking together, but we're not picky here. It's all going down. There we are. So we got the pasta mixed up and we're ready to go. I'm going to put this here. I guess I'll put it here on a burner that is not currently hot. And our cheese should be melted, and it is. So we're ready to plate the meal. So this is what our chicken looks like now after the cheese is melted, and we've got a nice brown coating. All right, the final step is plating. Soup's up, guys. Time to read. Okay, so to plate this, we add our pasta, like so. Then we add the sauce to the pasta. Do a nice good coating on there. And then finally, we add our chicken. I say the word chicken and Jonesy gets very excited. It's her favorite treat. And then finally, we have our vegetables on the side. And voila, we're ready to go. Super simple, fewer than 10 ingredients, 7 if I counted correctly. Thanks so much again for joining us for Italian Cooking for Shut-ins. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it's useful. And I wish you all a good night.